Hello and welcome then to our special focus on how the world is looking at the Indian economy in this crucial COVID period, when growth is low, inflation high, when jobs are being lost and incomes are falling. Today we will get a cutting-edge perspective on where we stand as an economy and what is the difficult road ahead. What are the solutions that India as a country has to kickstart growth once again? We are joined by two of the country's leading economists, presently based in the US. Former Chief Economic Advisor, Dr. Kaushik Basu from Cornell University in New York State, where he's Professor of Economics, and from Washington, D.C., by Dr. Surjit Bhalla, who is Executive Director, IMF for India, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and Sri Lanka. Remember, we've recorded earlier with Dr. Basu. Dr. Bhalla joins us live. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us on this very special program. Let's start with you, Dr. Basu, because you have become a real critic of the Modi government on the economy, and I'm going to refer to two recent tweets to set this off. You tweeted recently, new growth data for 2021 shows India growth minus 7.3% is now 142 among 194 nations, a shocking drop in rank for a nation once among the fastest growers. For those who say this happened to all nations because of COVID, my advice is reread your school notes on the meaning of rank. You seem to believe, therefore, Dr. Basu, that this is not so much about the COVID pandemic that has resulted in India's poor economic performance, but you seem to suggest that the Modi government has failed, and that reflects in our rank falling. Am I correct?
Yeah, Rajdeep, see, the drop in rank is a just pure number, completely confirmed. So, and that is not a political matter, really. India has dropped rank dramatically. But there are two things which we have to keep in mind about the current economic situation. One is the short run, which is what I was referring to in the tweet that you mentioned, the sharp drop in rank from among the world's 3-4 fastest growing economies to now somewhere between the 140th to 170th. You know, countries make small adjustments, but in any case, it's a dramatic drop. That's the short run. The short run is worrying, but at one level, you can say that because of the pandemic, and this is such a novel situation, governments the world over have handled it in different ways. Some have paid off. Vietnam has come out really on top. Bangladesh has done very well. There are other countries, Thailand, Indonesia, beginning to hobble back. India was caught unlucky. Unlucky in terms of policy choices. So you can't shrug off the blame, but it's a novel situation. But actually the bigger worry, and not captured in this tweet, is something that can be saved, is India's long run. The current situation is very difficult. It's a sudden situation, but the long run, there are dangers. India is no longer being talked about in the language in which India used to be described some 10 years ago. It's the sort of Asian tiger, the new Asian tiger coming on the block. That's no longer the language. All over the world, there is a sort of downsizing of expectations from India. But here, I feel very conflicted because I am among a minority that feels that India's fundamental strengths, and I'll go into that if you want later, are there. So it's just a question of the government pulling in all players and paying attention to the long run and putting India back on track where it was. And for that, let me just put in one particular political economy point, which is worth keeping in mind. You know, politics, and this is not the government and the opposition, this is true of all. Politics thrives on divisiveness. People like to divide because then it's easier to manage. Whereas the economy thrives on trust and cooperation. And at one point, you have to say that politics has to take second place. The economy is important. We have to work together. Across groups, we have to work together. And given India's fundamental strengths, India can do it. Yes, it's been a very bad 1.5 years, 2 years, but we can clamber out of here.
What you've put in perspective is your belief, therefore, that India has slipped in rank in this COVID pandemic period, and therefore, in your view, this is far more serious than just putting it on the pandemic. Why don't you respond to that, Dr. Bhalla? Because the whole belief that we were going to be this trillion-dollar economy, we were going to be the Asian tiger, and we were the economy to watch out for. Has the bubble burst a bit in the last 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Rajdeep. On India's growth rate, everybody has an estimate. Everybody's allowed to have an estimate. But here at the fund, the World Economic Outlook, which is considered the gold standard for forecasts of growth. And what we have in the WEO, which was released in April of this year, that India has first, in terms of 2020-21, the previous estimate was minus 10%, and now it is likely to be somewhere around minus 7%.
Yes.
Second, the WEO, as you know, forecasts the growth rate for all the countries until for the 4-year forward forecast. So every year until then. And India is back on track starting 22 for 21, 22 and onwards. And indeed has one of the highest growth rates for the next 4 years. That is, if you take out the 2021 pandemic period, India is absolutely back on track. So I would suggest that...
You're saying India is back on track. Just to understand, you're saying India is back on track. You look at, in fact, the neighborhood as well. The fact is, Dr. Bhalla, Bangladesh now has better numbers than India on fiscal deficit, on merchandise trade balance, on employment, and on growth at the moment. I mean, Bangladesh seems to have handled the pandemic better than us. I mean, there could be an argument.
There are two separate issues you're talking about. One is the pandemic, and the second is the growth performance of Bangladesh. Now, in terms of, this may be news to several people, but Bangladesh has a much lower per capita income than India, and it's a well-known fact for the last 100 years. There's something called catch-up. The lower your per capita income, the faster your expected growth. So this is something that we should expect, will happen, and is preordained to happen. That's part of the parcel of moving towards a frontier level of per capita income. Has nothing to do necessarily with policies, etc. Now, clearly Bangladesh is doing much better than other countries at the same per capita income level. That's absolutely great, and that is to be applauded. Similarly, India is doing much better and expected to do much better than other countries at the same per capita income level.
Okay. Let me then come to the second point which Dr. Basu is raising. I want to come to you, Dr. Basu, to your second tweet, where you say, it's painful to watch the desecration, and that's a strong word, of India's economy by callousness and a lack of leadership. Inflation, which I want to focus on now, high 10.5%, growth low, minus 7.38%, unemployment high, 14.7% in the month of May, youth unemployment very high, 23.75% 2020, sad given the talent in the country, people and even government. Again, you seem to be blaming the Modi government for the current economic crisis, that it is not so much the pandemic or what happened in the last 1 year or 15 months. There is something you seem to believe which is fundamentally wrong with the economy. Am I correct? Who are you blaming at the moment?
The drop in rank is ours. Everyone in the world cannot drop rank. That's the point I was making. So the crisis has slowed down every economy in the world. But India has slowed down much more than other economies. And even if you look at the turnaround that is coming, World Bank has just put out yesterday or day before, that in the coming year, 21-22, India's growth is going to be going up to, I think they put it as 8.3% or 8.2%. But after a drop of 7.3%, then 1 year later, a climb of, say, 8.3% is still 1% over 2 years. So this way, India has done worse than other countries. It has dropped rank. So you have to take that in the face. But, and India has strengths also if you look at the recent Monetary Policy Committee after the committee report, the statement that has come out from the central bank governor, I think it's a very balanced statement. He points to exactly what I'm pointing out over there very carefully in central bank language, that India has twin dangers that you have to be careful about. Inflation is picking up. Growth is down. Growth is down by rank, by every way. India's growth has come down. Inflation picking up and growth coming down is the classic feature of stagflation. The economy is stagnating and prices are picking up. That report actually is a wonderful report because I feel India's central bank does its policies very well. I'm also glad I should point out that the governor quotes Epictetus, my favorite Greek philosopher, in this report on the economy. But it points to the twin dangers which I'm pointing to. I'm pointing to more blatantly with the language very, very clear, crystal clear. This is where you have to get together and do. I have a prescription I can go to straight away because there are other countries which have begun doing it. The mistake that India's made, and I really don't blame anyone because this was a very novel situation. India was taking one step at a time. First, you try to handle the pandemic, the massive lockdown with no attention to the economy. In retrospect, we know that was a big mistake. It froze the economy completely. But now we realize that you have to do the economy and the health measure together. And there are examples from Asia. Indonesia, towards the end of last year, 2020, the President Jokowi put together a committee which was COVID, health management, and national economic recovery. A committee that handles both these together, bringing in some very fine independent experts with independent thought to the health and the economy to be managed together. That's the kind of thing that India needs to do now. And really, this is for all sides, not just for the government. Put politics aside, get together, bring in the best expertise. India has huge potentials, clamber right back up there. One more thing about monetary and fiscal policy, worth keeping in mind. The responsibility, really the bulk of it, because I feel monetary policy is being managed quite well. Exchange rate, I watch exchange rates very obsessively and closely, being managed very well. Clearly, the Reserve Bank is buying and selling using its massive foreign exchange reserve, now virtually $600 billion, very well to do that. Where we need action is fiscal policy, which has to be much more nuanced. In a standard recession, you just inflate the economy, you put in more buying power in the hands of the people. But when you get a recession, which is being caused by a pandemic, some sectors are doing very well, some sectors are doing very badly, which means the intervention that you need, the fiscal intervention, cannot be a bland buying power in the hands of people, as John Maynard Keynes had suggested for a general recession. It has to be a very, very nuanced policy, and that needs to be worked out. So expertise is the crucial thing. India's too complex a creature. Its potential is huge. If the potential was not that great, I wouldn't have felt bad. India doesn't have a potential. It'll fumble back to its normal state. But I think India has the potential to be right there in the forefront of the world, and we need to work on that immediately.
So let's come, therefore, Dr. Bhalla, to two issues that are being raised by Dr. Basu one by one. One is stagflation. He believes we are in serious risk of flattening growth and increasingly high inflation. We are now seeing inflation numbers peaking, a year-long peak of inflation, and we are seeing growth tapering off. That's the first danger. How do you respond to that? Could we be heading for stagflation, Dr. Bhalla?
Yeah, good point. Let me first address the rank issue which Kaushik brought up again. When I stated, and as he well knows, the growth rate is what determines your rank from the previous year. And we are back. India, according to the IMF, is back amongst the fastest growing economies in the world starting next year. So you can do whatever you want with the ranks, but that's what we say, it's irrelevant.
No, but hold on, Dr. Bhalla, when you say, just a minute, when you say fastest, just a minute, sir. When you say fastest growing economy, you saw the point that Dr. Basu made. He said, even if we grow at 8% in the coming year, we are coming from a base of minus 7.3. So in real terms, it will be just 1%.
Rajdeep,
go ahead.
Rajdeep, every country is coming from a lower base So that takes account.
Okay.
As you know, the US was coming from a lower base and is showing very high growth. Let me come to the growth. So every country is coming from a lower base in 2020 by definition. So let's not waste time on what basis. Let me come to the important point of stagflation, et cetera, raised by Kaushik. And, there is a very constructive debate in the world right now about the new macro and the old macro. There are those like Kaushik who argue that we are back to stagflation. And indeed, in the US, and let me separate it out into both inflation first, and then I'll come to the growth rate. Growth rate I've already talked about. In terms of inflation, just yesterday, the US CPI came out at 5.5%, which is the highest inflation rate in the last 14 years. This is what is called the base effect. If you look at inflation, whether in India or elsewhere, you will find that basically over the last 15, 20 years, there has been a convergence in inflation rates. And the gap between the emerging market inflation rate and the gap and the advanced country inflation rate is now down to 1.5%. So, and remember, the advanced countries' inflation rate is down to an average of 1.3%. And let us say it even goes up by 50%, it will still be less than the 2% target that the US Fed has and that the advanced countries have for the aggregate inflation rate. So I think, second, the markets are pricing this in. And they are another forecaster, just like Kaushik is a forecaster, the markets are a forecaster. And the 10-year bond yield in the US is now below 1.5%. So, the markets are clearly not buying, or some portion of the markets are buying, and some portion, or the large segment of the market, which is the US bond market, which, as you know, James Carville said that he wanted, who was a major US strategist, he wanted to come back as a bond player. The bond markets reflect everybody's opinion in the world. And they are now forecasting that that there will be good growth. They are not forecasting that. You have independent forecasts of growth as well as low inflation. Now, we can get together 6 months from now, maybe a year from now, on whether Kaushik is right with stagflation or whether
your own view is your own view, Dr. Bhalla. Is your own view that we should not be concerned about those like Dr. Basu who are suggesting the prospect of stagflation, stagnant growth, and high inflation? Are you saying 6 months from now you believe inflation will be under control?
Yes, I'm saying, look, and there are several papers that I have been working on with co-authors, etc., on world inflation, Indian inflation, etc. And you notice that the number that Kaushik used, no one in the world is using right now, and no one in India is using right now except Kaushik, which is the wholesale price index. Now, we have even, in India, we're moving away from the wholesale price index.
But even our retail price index is at a consumer price index is at a high. There is a problem.
No, Kaushik, we can have that as a separate debate. I want to come to some of the other issues.
Yeah, he raised the issue. He raised the issue, for example, Dr. Bhalla, of Indonesia. He gives the example of Indonesia and says there the government consciously looked for expert groups and married the health policy initiatives with the economy. We went in for a national lockdown. The economy got locked down. We're still paying a price.
Yeah, let me now come to the issue of Indonesia and the fact that people get together, the policymakers get together in Indonesia, and they're not getting together in India, is what I understand Kaushik and you to be saying. Let's now look at what the facts are and what the forecasts are by experts. Indonesia, despite everything else, is forecast to grow at 2.7% from 2020 to 2024. India is forecast by the same expert groups to grow at 3.8% per capita. This was per capita numbers, and in terms of the gross numbers, about 5%. So Indonesia, he's saying, they got together, etc. And as and Kaushik should know better, that the proof is in the pudding. The proof is in the result. not whether you get X, Y, and Z in order to have a committee meeting. Maybe the committee meetings help. I'm sure they do. Every country in the world has committees to look at various aspects, and that is good. But ultimately, what he will judge, what you will judge, what I will judge, the performance is in the numbers.
Yes, but that's precisely it, Dr. Bhalla. Before I move on to the numbers itself, all the numbers that are staring at us, whether it's growth, whether it's unemployment, whether it's inflation, all of which should be worrying. I mean, you know, the sense one is getting that you're giving me the impression that this government is fully in control of the economy, while critics are saying the government's messed up. Where's the truth?
Okay, Rajdeep, let me just answer all of those one by one. Number one, do not take 2020 as a benchmark of anything. That's number one. Because it's distorted by the pandemic, which has affected the world. So you are taking, and Kaushik is taking 2020. Let's the audience know what is it that I am doing.
Sir, sorry to intervene again. Since 2016 or since 2017 January, post-demonetization, Indian economy has declined consistently. Let's be very clear. We have declined our numbers. 2016 growth was 8.25%. 2017 it became 7.04. 2018 6.12. 2019 4.18. And then 2020 is when recession hits. This is not something that's happened in the pandemic. It's pre-pandemic.
Kaushik, Rajdeep,
yes.
Let's not talk about 2016 onwards or 2015 onwards. Whatever you want to talk about, I'm more than happy. World growth, I'm giving you now the numbers of world growth, went down by 50 basis points from 2% world growth to 1.5% 2015 to 2019. Okay? So all I'm saying is that you cannot look at, and I'll come to the Indian growth in a minute for 2015 to 2019. You cannot look at, this is a global world. You know that better than most people. And in a global world, you cannot look at any country in isolation. If the world growth rate declines, our growth rate will decline. If the world growth rate goes up, our growth rate is likely to go up. Okay. So that's the first point. One second. Now let me. So this is the story. When I'm giving you the numbers from 2020 to 2024, which are the numbers that I'm citing, which are the IMF, WEO numbers, those are the ones which incorporate what the estimates of the best experts are. Now coming to the decline in Indian growth per se. One is the world growth has been a phenomena, absolutely. Second, what are the Indian policies that made the decline in growth rate? It turns out that between 2017 and 2019, real interest rates in India, policy rates in India, were the highest in the developing world, which means they were also highest in the whole world. If that is the case, and at least as you know, I've appeared on your program various times, various programs, various papers, etc. The cost of capital, I mentioned the bond market before, the cost of capital is a significant factor in determining economic growth. Those were at the highest levels. One second, Rajdeep, let me just finish. What is the reason I'm optimistic for the next 4 years or post 2019, excepting 2020, which was the pandemic year, is that the RBI has done a superb job. And this is, I'm very happy to agree with Kaushik, same view as Kaushik in terms of managing interest rates and managing the economy from the financial side. Interest rates, real interest rates in India are now -1%, -2%. And this augurs very well for future growth in India. So I think the reason I'm optimistic that India will do better than expectations was the cost of capital is down. Second, and to realistic level rather than astronomical levels that the RBI took it from 2015 to 2019. And second is that there's been a lot of infrastructure investment, various aspects of the economy. Capital investment is continuing despite the pandemic. So I think infrastructure investment in particular, we have opened up the economy a lot more than we ever had before. Foreign investment, we were talking, Kaushik didn't mention, as to the last year, the pandemic year, foreign investment, portfolio investment in India was the highest ever. So clearly, Kaushik sees the world and India differently than most of the world sees.
No, I think the two of, let me be fair, two of you see it differently. I'm not going to go to the rest of the world, but let's turn to Dr. Basu, because you mentioned, Dr. Basu, right at the outset about policy choices. Now, this is where we come. You've heard, Dr. Bhalla has said, of course, that he believes that the downturn has taken place because of the pandemic. Now, my contention is that the downturn in the economy is not about 2020-21, but that the growth rate has remained static or gone down consistently since 2017, post-demonetization. Do you believe, Dr. Basu, that was the critical turning point? Or is it the pandemic in the last 1 year that has forced us to look at these numbers more harshly?
So that's, again, the pandemic is the short-run problem that we are in. We have handled it badly, but again, I don't blame anyone because this is such a novel situation. No one quite knew what the right thing to do is. We were unlucky. But the long run, yes, what you're pointing to, actually from 2017, exactly right. We've had 5 years of slower growth than the previous year, which has never happened before. So the problem in India started from 2016, the growth slowdown. So it is not the pandemic. And that's where you need novel ideas. Rajdeep, can I toss in one slightly novel idea?
Please do.
Sovereign, India has massive foreign exchange reserve. I know this is controversial because central banks don't like the government using it, but I feel we should think creatively of a sovereign wealth fund. Take a tiny bit of the massive foreign exchange reserve and treat it as a sovereign wealth fund in order to invest in infrastructure, put in investment, get investment going and growing. India does have one, the National Investment and Infrastructure Fund, but it's tiny, not in keeping with the size of the country. This is an idea that will be controversial. Not everyone agrees that a country should have a sovereign wealth fund, especially if you don't have any windfall gain, like Norway had with oil and then set up its sovereign wealth fund, the very famous one. But these are the kinds of ideas that need to be discussed. For this, you need to bring in the best professionals from across the board. And at this juncture, you need health experts and economists together and in pure expertise, putting politics aside.
Therefore, what you're saying, Dr. Basu, is you're calling for more expertise in handling the economy. You're calling for a complete recasting of policy choices, taking on much more innovation going ahead. But let's also be honest, everything is premised in a way on how long the pandemic is going to last. So are there options for the near term and those for the long term? How do you visualize the next 5 years? Because the fact is, I don't want to look beyond the 5 years, as that is when we were supposed to become a $5 trillion economy. How do you visualize the next 5 years?
Yeah, that is, of course, impossible now, the $1 trillion economy. For the next 5 years, first 1 or 2 years, we have done very poorly in terms of our vaccine policy. So we are going to be stumbling along for a while with the pandemic, even if there isn't a full-fledged third wave. If there is a bit of a third wave of the kind we are seeing in South Africa, after the massive second wave, another wave coming up, if that happens, we will be in trouble because we have handled our vaccination very poorly. In terms of, just to put this on record as data, I think right now, India's percentage of population that is fully vaccinated is 3.5% or 3.3%. Fully vaccinated is 3.3 or 3.5, roughly there. We are 85th in the world, one of the biggest vaccine producers. So we have handled that badly. We have to work rapidly now to vaccinate the population because the only way to get the economy going, not damaging the economy and controlling the pandemic, is the vaccination. So we have done badly, admit it. It's best it becomes, gives people confidence if you admit that we have done this badly, but we are going to rectify that. Get that, the immediate 1 or 2 years, we will manage reasonably well. And then what you are rightly pointing to is the next 5 years. But to plan for that, you can't wait because you don't want to be caught by surprise that, no, the whole economy is tanking. For the 5-year plan, also, you immediately need to put together a body that is going to think of completely novel interventions, because the world's pattern of growth is going to be very different here onwards. And India has the thinking power. India has, by the way, an entrepreneurial class. The Indian corporate class is very, very innovative. That is what has put India in the front lines. In the information, software, IT sector, India is a global player. Pharmacies, pharmaceutical products, India is a global player. So we have that talent. We have got a lot of higher educational talent. India has always done very poorly in terms of basic education, unfortunate. But India has a lot of talent at the top. We should rectify the basic education, but tap on the talent at the top. And once again, politics thrives on divisiveness. The economy needs unity, trust, and cooperation. This is the time where we have to put politics on a pause and work on the economy.
You know, in a sense, what you're saying, Dr. Basu, you're seeing opportunities in the pandemic, possibly in areas like IT, education, health, and importantly, for the second time today, you are warning that divisive politics will harm future opportunities. You keep harping on divisive politics. Do you want to explain why you believe divisive politics will harm the growth of the economy?
Yeah, absolutely. And the way you summarized is exactly right. The economy depends on many clear economic variables. How you do your fiscal policy, people will agree or disagree on sovereign wealth fund, how you manage your monetary policy. Those things are known and we spend a lot of time. But there are studies by sociologists, by political scientists, and you cannot ignore this because the economy is embedded in politics and society. There are studies which show that trust is a critical factor. An economy that is a trusting economy does well. And actually, there are these global studies which show that Scandinavian countries, Nordic countries are very high trusting countries, and they have done very well. Interestingly, East Asia is a very trusting region. People trust one another a lot. And East Asia, you've got the Asian tigers, the economy is taking off. I feel India stumbled onto this. We were slow. But India was becoming a country that worked together. There was trust beginning to build up between the ordinary people, the masses, and the better off and the businesses. That is being eroded. And you can see concrete signs of that also in terms of inequality. Over the last 1 year, Oxfam tells us that the richest people, some 100 billionaires, are richer by 35% in the middle of this crisis. Whereas the masses are doing very poorly. Unemployment is very, very high in India. These are things that erode trust. And it is for political leaders to reach out and say that we want to build trust in society. And trust is also minorities have to feel included. So, and that has been eroded. I mean, this has been written about, people are feeling that. You have to build on that. If you can build on that, not the immediate crisis. Immediate crisis is fiscal policy, monetary policy, etc. But if you want India back on track, with a 5-year target that we will be back where we were, the world's leading growing economy, we need to get that political trust, political unity back again in the country. And I hope the leadership will pay attention to that.
You're making a very important point that Dr. Bhalla, I'm sure you want to respond to. Here is Dr. Basu saying politics thrives on divisiveness. The economy thrives on trust. He also goes on to add, Dr. Basu, that you can't separate the health policy, vaccination programs from the state of the economy. But let's take that first contentious point that Dr. Basu's made for twice in the program, that we have at the moment divisive politics and no trust at the moment in the economy. How do you respond to that? That the economy must thrive on trust, not on divisiveness.
Yeah, thank you. You know, in 2019, I was at a competitor channel, your ex channel,
Yes.
News 18, and they did a survey just at the time of the election, showing that trust, that the reason they forecast that Prime Minister Modi would win the election, 2019 election, was that people were trusting him more. So in other words, the same phenomena, trust, was used as an argument ex ante 2019, showing that the reason Modi was popular was because people were trusting him to do the right thing. So we'll have to wait for other surveys, perhaps other elections, in order to determine whether, and surveys. This was a survey before the election. So in other words, it was stating this was the finding from a survey. The election could have gone whichever way.
That's true, but
all
there's
I'm
a
saying
you,
is
you don't
that
you
the
don't
election
sense,
results. One second.
You don't sense, Dr. Bhalla, that somewhere as inequality grows at one level, and at the same time a sense of divided communities, according to Dr. Basu, a feeling grows that this will adversely affect the economy.
Yeah. So look, all I'm trying to point out, these were the exact same arguments, Rajdeep, which people made, columnists made, etc., in 2019. And we saw what the results were, what people felt, and what has happened. So all I'm saying is, the reason you have horse races is people have different opinions. If you didn't have different opinions, you wouldn't have horse races.
Dr. Bhalla, then the second point. Take on the second point, which Dr. Basu is reiterating. We cannot separate our health vaccination policy from our economic choices. For much too long, we seem to be operating in completely separate boxes. Our vaccination program hasn't taken off, according to Dr. Basu. And if you look at numbers, 3.5% of the population vaccinated, just not good enough. Without that, the economy is not going to come back on track. Businesses will not start, particularly small micro businesses. They are the ones hurting the most. And that's where the jobs are being lost.
Yeah. Look, the vaccine policy, or rather vaccines, is an issue that I have written about. And I am glad that we are all on the same page, that the vaccinations are very important source of getting the health of the economy back. Prior to that, and I'll come to this in a minute, I wanted to mention and emphasize that there are two issues on which Kaushik and I seem to agree on. He mentioned a sovereign wealth fund, and I would like to just plug the HLAG report that we did for the Department of Commerce, where we talked about the notion of elephant bonds, that India should issue elephant bonds, attract the foreign capital from abroad that Indians have abroad, bring it into India, and help finance the infrastructure, water, electricity, all the various issues that really, all the various expenditures that really help the poor. Or when I say the poor, I mean the bottom 70-75% of the population. They're not actually poor, but that's where policy should be targeted towards. Now let's come to the vaccine policy. As you know, the world over, there's been a lot of discussion about access to vaccines. The US, and you saw that Poonawalla plea to the US to stop or to remove restrictions on raw materials for the export of vaccines. Again, let us, the fact that we are the largest producer in the world of vaccines doesn't necessarily say that we will have the vaccines. There are other countries that have bought the vaccines up, apart from the restrictions on export or restrictions on raw materials.
Right.
It turns out, according to the WHO and the organizations looking at the vaccines problem, that as of now, there is 1.5 billion doses of vaccine that the advanced countries together have bought up. That is 1.5 billion doses in excess of a dose for every man, woman, and child in the advanced countries. This is a problem that the world has to acknowledge, the developed countries have to acknowledge, and these vaccines could easily have been transferred to the developing countries. And I would hope that you and Kaushik, etc., all look at the issue of vaccines in a dispassionate way, and so that because we both agree, all three of us agree, that it's absolutely essential to get the country vaccinated and to get all the people vaccinated. I may not agree that all the people, there's a big debate going on whether you need to get adults or people under the age of 18 vaccinated. But be that as it may,
you're saying therefore vaccine access and vaccine equity remain big issues. I just have 2 minutes left, and I'm going to ask both of you therefore in conclusion to conclude with this. You know, there's so much of talk about India's inherent strength of the economy. Do you see, Dr. Basu, that inherent strength working in favor of the Indian economy a year, 2 years down the line, assuming that we vaccinated, the pandemic is under control? Do you believe that we will be in a better space irrespective of who is in power in the next few years? Or do you believe that there is something fundamentally wrong at the moment with the way the economy is gone? I just want to end with where we started off, your final future projection.
Yes. Irrespective of whoever is in power, we will recover rank. So right now, actually after the latest data has come in, India is, I think, 140th or 142nd in the world. We were once in the top 3, top 10 for sure. I feel whoever is in power, whichever government, India will climb back to the 40th fastest growing country in the world, 30th fastest growing country in the world. But will we get back to the top 3? No. For that, no meaning, for that is conditional. For that, you need policies to get us back over there. And so that's what I'm worried about. Getting back to the 40th fastest growing economy in the world, it will happen. Okay. No matter what we do, India has strengths enough. But India has also those hidden strengths, which if we capitalize with good economic policy, India can be in the 3 fastest growing economies in the world. Am I hopeful about that? I frankly don't know. I do feel dejected about the nature of politics in India. So I don't know whether we will have the courage, the farsightedness to claim the spot where we were barely 6-7 years ago. That is possible, but I'm not sure.
Okay, that's the critic in a way speaking there. I'll give you the final 30 seconds, Dr. Bhalla. Do you believe that the Modi government has those far-sighted policies? Does it have the expertise to get the economy back on track? A quick final answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is proven by the record since 2014 that it has the capacity, it has the will, it has the policy-making strength in order to bring about.
You're saying that despite 2016 to 2021, the continued deceleration on growth,
Kaushik,
the decline in growth, you're still saying the contraction, that they've got the talent.
Rajdeep, I will be more than happy to discuss the 2016 to 2021 period anytime you want. Okay. But let's not keep. I have already answered that question. You're picking and choosing.
You're positive. You believe the glasses are full.
I'm saying that there is very little doubt, no doubt in my mind, that India is on the right track in terms of economic policy, that we will get back to whether we are in the top 3, 4, etc. As I mentioned, there is a catch-up phenomena around the world across time for the last 500 years. So whether I think that's not the real objective. The objective is that we should get back to our potential rate of growth, and our potential rate of growth is somewhere around, latest calculation, 6 to 7% GDP.
Okay, let me leave it there.
That is what I think.
I would have rather you said 8 to 9%. Remember, we were 8% in 2016, but we will debate 2016 on another day. We will do that on another day. Dr. Basu, Dr. Bhalla, it's been a pleasure having you and sharing your insights to us. 2 clear points of view that have given us a deeper sense of where we stand as an economy. Thank you both very much for joining me here on this special Friday Night Focus.